Jamal Thompson was having another late night in his dad's auto repair shop when everything changed. The old building sat on the edge of Chicago's South Side, surrounded by stacks of broken cars and spare parts from every make and model you could imagine. Most people saw junk, but Jamal saw possibilities. He'd been working on a weird piece of tech he'd found last week, something that definitely wasn't from Earth. It looked like a radio, but when he hooked it up to some car batteries and old speakers, it picked up signals from way out in space. Tonight, those signals were different. Urgent. Desperate. The voice that came through wasn't human. It spoke in clicks and whistles, but somehow the machine translated it into English. What Jamal heard made his blood run cold. Emergency transmission to all qualified technicians in this sector. Our primary computational system has suffered complete failure. 12 worlds will die without immediate repair. Standard protocols have proven ineffective. Time remaining until catastrophic containment breach, 47 hours, 12 minutes. Jamal sat back in his creaky chair, grease still coating his hands from working on Mrs. Johnson's Honda. 12 worlds? He looked around the cluttered garage, tools scattered everywhere, oil stains on the concrete floor, his dad's collection of coffee cans filled with bolts and screws. The alien voice continued. The Nexus Prime quantum computer has entered cascade failure while processing terraforming calculations. Our best engineers have worked for 21 days without success. Each attempted solution has worsened the instability. We are requesting immediate assistance from any species with advanced computational repair capabilities. Advanced computational repair capabilities. Jamal almost laughed. He'd barely graduated high school, spent most of his time helping his pops fix cars and motorcycles. But he'd also spent the last 8 years taking apart every piece of alien technology that crashed, broke down, or got abandoned in their neighborhood. Chicago seemed to be a magnet for that stuff. Maybe it was the Great Lakes, or the way the city's steel buildings interfered with alien navigation systems. Whatever the reason, Jamal had learned to make sense of technology that came from worlds he couldn't even pronounce. The transmission crackled again. Current failure state: quantum processing matrices locked in recursive probability loops. Each calculation thread creates interference patterns with parallel nodes. The system is essentially thinking itself to death. Estimated time until quantum singularity formation: 46 hours, 53 minutes. Thinking itself to death. Now that was something Jamal understood. He'd seen it happen with Earth computers too, programs that got so caught up in their own logic that they froze completely. Sometimes the solution wasn't more complexity. Sometimes you just had to give the system a way to break out of its own thoughts. He looked at his toolbox, the same beat-up metal case his grandfather had used to fix radios back in the day. Nothing fancy, just reliable tools that got the job done. Hammers, screwdrivers, electrical tape, wire strippers. Stuff that had been solving problems long before anyone invented quantum anything. The alien voice was getting more frantic. The quantum cascade is expanding exponentially. If containment fails, the resulting singularity will consume our research station and potentially destabilize spacetime in a radius of... Jamal reached for the microphone he'd jerry-rigged to the alien communicator. His heart was pounding, but his voice came out steady. This is Jamal Thompson in Chicago, Illinois, Earth. I think I can help you with your computer problem. The transmission went silent for a long moment. When the alien voice returned, it sounded confused. Please repeat your credentials and species designation. I'm human. 22 years old. I fix things for a living. Jamal paused, looking around the garage again. I know it doesn't sound like much, but I've been working on alien tech since I was 14. Your computer sounds like it's stuck in a loop, right? Sometimes the best way to fix that isn't with more advanced technology. Sometimes you just need to think differently about the problem. Another pause. What formal education do you possess in quantum computational theory? None. But I know how to unstick things that are stuck. And from what you're describing, your fancy computer is just stuck. Really, really stuck. The silence stretched longer this time. Jamal could hear his own heartbeat, could smell the familiar mix of motor oil and coffee that always filled the shop. Finally, the alien voice returned, different now, more desperate, maybe more willing to try anything. Human designated Jamal Thompson, we are transmitting navigational coordinates to our station. Can your species achieve faster than light travel? Jamal grinned, looking at his dad's old pickup truck parked outside. Working on it. The argument started before Darius even made it through the airlock of the alien space station. He could hear the voices, some high-pitched and musical, others deep and rumbling, all speaking in what sounded like organized chaos. His borrowed translation device was working overtime just to keep up. This is absolutely ridiculous, came the first clear translation. The voice belonged to something called a Thalan, whatever that was. We have spent 3 weeks on this problem. 3 weeks of our finest minds working around the clock, and now we're supposed to believe that a primitive species from a backwater planet can solve what we cannot. Darius stepped into what looked like the fanciest conference room he'd ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that seemed to pulse with its own light. Floating holographic displays showed numbers and diagrams that hurt his brain to look at. And standing around a massive table were the strangest beings he'd ever imagined. The Thalan looked like a walking piece of living glass, tall and angular with what might have been a face somewhere near the top. Its voice came from speakers built into the wall since it apparently didn't have a mouth. Next to it stood something that looked like a cross between an octopus and a computer, dozens of thin metallic arms constantly moving, adjusting controls and manipulating holographic displays. Chief Engineer Veltar raises valid concerns, said another voice, this one coming from a creature that resembled a walking tree made of blue metal. Our computational specialists have advanced degrees from the finest institutions in 7 sectors. This human possesses what credentials exactly? All eyes, and there were a lot of different kinds of eyes in that room, turned to Darius. He stood there in his work boots, jeans with oil stains, and a Detroit Lions t-shirt that had seen better days. His grandfather's toolbox hung from his shoulder, the metal case dented and scratched from decades of use. Well, Darius said, setting down his toolbox with a solid thunk on their fancy crystal table, I dropped out of community college after 2 semesters. Spent the last 6 years working in my uncle's garage fixing cars mostly. But I've also been messing around with alien tech since I was 16. The silence in the room was deafening. Some of the aliens were making sounds that the translator couldn't even convert into words. Alien tech, repeated the tree-like being slowly. You refer to technology from our various civilizations as alien tech. Yeah, sorry about that. I mean, from my perspective, you guys are the aliens, right? Darius grinned, trying to break the tension. Look, I know how this sounds. Trust me, if I were in your shoes, or whatever you wear on your feet, I'd be pretty skeptical too. The octopus computer thing made a sound like static electricity. Skeptical is insufficient. This is bordering on insulting. We are facing a cascade failure that threatens to create a quantum singularity, and the solution is supposed to come from someone who messes around with technology. Dr. Kelnara, the head scientist who had authorized Darius's emergency transport, stepped forward. She looked almost human except for the extra set of arms and the fact that her skin seemed to shimmer like oil on water. Colleagues, we have 31 hours remaining before containment failure becomes inevitable. Our conventional approaches have not only failed but have made the situation progressively worse. Perhaps it is time to consider unconventional solutions. This isn't unconventional, Veltar protested, its crystalline form flickering with what might have been frustration. This is desperate to the point of insanity. Darius pulled out his phone and showed them a picture. See this? It's a navigation computer from a Corvin transport ship that crashed outside Detroit 3 years ago. When I found it, it was completely fried, wouldn't even power on. Your people probably would have declared it a total loss. He swiped to the next picture, showing the same device but clearly functional, displaying star charts and navigation data. Took me a week to figure out the problem. Turns out, Corvin computers are really sensitive to electromagnetic interference. All that fancy shielding you guys use actually made it worse in Earth's magnetic field. You know what fixed it? A 25-cent resistor from Radio Shack and some aluminum foil. The room fell quiet again, but this time it felt different. Some of the aliens were actually listening now. The point is, Darius continued, sometimes when you're too smart, you miss the simple solutions. You guys have been trying to fix this thing with quantum theory and advanced mathematics. But what if the answer isn't more complexity? What if it's less? Dr. Kelnara's shimmer seemed to intensify. You believe you can repair our most sophisticated computational system with simple solutions? I don't know yet. Haven't seen it. But I can tell you this, every broken thing has a reason it's broken. Sometimes that reason is complicated, but sometimes it's stupid simple and everyone's just looking in the wrong place. The countdown timer on the wall showed 30 hours and 43 minutes remaining. In the distance, alarms were still sounding from the computer core where the most advanced minds in the galaxy had failed to prevent disaster. Darius picked up his toolbox and looked around the room at the assembled geniuses. So, he said with a smile that had gotten him out of trouble since elementary school, anyone want to show me this computer that's giving you so much trouble? The walk to the computer core took 15 minutes through corridors that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. Everything was smooth curves and glowing panels, with aliens hurrying back and forth carrying equipment that probably cost more than Darius's entire neighborhood back home. But he wasn't thinking about the fancy hallways or the incredible technology around him. He was listening. The Nexus Prime was making noise. "You hear that humming?" Darius asked Dr. Kelnara as they walked. "It's not steady. There's a wobble in it, like a washing machine with clothes bunched up on one side." "The quantum resonance frequency has been unstable since the cascade began," she replied, her forearms moving in what might have been the alien equivalent of a shrug. "Our acoustic specialists believe it indicates core matrix fluctuation." "Maybe. Or maybe your computer's just stressed out and trying to tell you something." They passed through 3 different security checkpoints, each one requiring biometric scans that the station's computer had to specially calibrate for human physiology. The closer they got to the core, the more nervous the alien technicians became. Darius could see it in the way they moved, quick, jerky motions instead of their usual fluid grace. Finally, they reached the main observation deck overlooking the Nexus Prime's core chamber. "Holy!" Darius stopped himself before finishing the curse, remembering where he was. "That's your computer?" The thing was massive. 3 stories tall and shaped like a crystalline mountain. It pulsed with colors that didn't have names in any human language. Energy patterns danced across its surface like trapped lightning, and the air around it shimmered with heat distortion. Warning lights flashed everywhere, and the humming sound he'd been hearing was now a low roar that he could feel in his chest. The Nexus Prime contains 17 billion quantum processing nodes, Chief Engineer Veltar announced with what sounded like pride mixed with desperation. Each node can perform calculations at speeds that would require your entire planet's computational power to match. The complexity of its neural pathways exceeds. "Doc," Darius interrupted, "can you just tell me what it's supposed to do when it's working right?" Dr. Kelnara moved to a control panel that looked like it belonged in a spaceship cockpit. "It processes terraforming calculations for multiple worlds simultaneously. Environmental factors, atmospheric composition, geological stability, biological compatibility, millions of variables that must be balanced perfectly to make a dead planet suitable for life. And right now it's stuck in recursive loops. Each calculation it starts triggers 17 other calculations, which trigger more calculations which interfere with the original calculation. It's like someone who can't stop second-guessing themselves," Darius finished. He nodded slowly, studying the chaotic light patterns racing across the computer's surface. "Yeah, I've seen this before. Not on anything this big, but the principle's the same." He set down his toolbox and popped it open. The aliens around him took several steps back as he pulled out what looked like a rubber mallet. "What are you doing?" Veltar's voice climbed several octaves. "Gimme 3 minutes, Darius said, walking toward an access panel on the side of the core chamber. "Just 3 minutes to look around before you all start panicking." The access panel was designed for the Lon hands, which were apparently much more elegant than human fingers. Darius had to use a bent paperclip from his toolbox to trigger the release mechanism. The panel slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a maze of crystalline circuits and quantum processors that would have made NASA engineers weep with envy. "The quantum matrices are delicate beyond measure," Dr. Kelnara protested. "One incorrect adjustment could make it worse?" Darius asked, examining a junction box that was flickering erratically. "Lady, you've got 27 hours before this thing turns into a black hole. I'm pretty sure we're past worrying about making it worse." He traced the power flow with his finger, following the energy patterns like he was reading a road map. Every few seconds, he'd pull out his phone and take a picture of particularly interesting components. "See this?" He pointed to a cluster of processors that were cycling between blue and angry red. "These guys are fighting each other. Every time the blue one starts a calculation, the red one jumps in with a correction. Then the blue one corrects the correction and the red one corrects that. They're stuck in an argument that's never going to end." The aliens were all staring at him now. Some looked horrified, others fascinated. "The quantum entanglement protocols prevent any external interruption of the calculation cycles," Veltar said weakly. Darius grinned and pulled out a small transistor radio component from his toolbox. "The kind of part you could buy for 50 cents at any electronics store on Earth." "Yeah, but what if we don't interrupt them? What if we just give them something else to argue about?" 26 hours and 17 minutes remaining until containment failure. In the distance, alarms continued to sound as the most sophisticated computer in known space continued its digital nervous breakdown. Darius rolled up his sleeves and reached for his electrical tape. "Trust me on this one." Andre's hands moved with the kind of confidence that comes from years of fixing things that weren't supposed to be fixable. While the alien scientists watched in growing horror and fascination, he worked his way through the Nexus Prime's quantum matrices like he was troubleshooting his neighbor's busted car stereo. "What you've got here," he explained, carefully soldering the tiny Earth transistor into a junction that probably cost more than his entire city block, "is a computer that's too smart for its own good. It's like that kid in school who knew all the answers but could never decide which one was right." Dr. Kelnara's shimmer was shifting colors rapidly, apparently the alien equivalent of nervous sweating. "Andre, that component you're installing? It operates on completely different principles than our quantum systems. The interference patterns alone should cause..." "Should cause what?" Andre asked, not looking up from his work. "More problems? Doc, this thing is already trying to tear a hole in spacetime. I'm pretty sure a little interference isn't going to make things worse." He wrapped electrical tape around the connection with the same care his grandfather had taught him for fixing radios. "Measure twice, cut once, and always make sure your connections are solid. Some rules worked the same whether you were dealing with a 1970s Buick or a computer that could think faster than entire civilizations. The principle is simple," Andre continued, moving to another access panel. "Your computer keeps starting calculations, then stopping them because it thinks of a better way to do them. Then it stops those because it thinks of an even better way. It's stuck in a loop of trying to be perfect." Chief Engineer Veltar's crystalline form was flickering so fast it looked like a disco ball. "Perfection in calculation is the fundamental goal of any computational system. Approximation leads to error, error leads to failure. And perfectionism leads to paralysis," Andre finished. He pulled out what looked like a piece of wire from an old TV antenna. "Sometimes good enough is actually better than perfect, especially if perfect means never getting anything done." The wire went into a quantum processor that was cycling between 17 different calculation modes, unable to settle on any of them. The moment Andre made the connection, the cycling slowed, then stopped entirely. The processor settled into a steady blue glow. "Impossible," whispered one of the octopus-like engineers. "The quantum coherence should have collapsed completely with such crude intervention." "Not crude," Andre said, moving to the next problem area. "Practical. See, your computer was trying to account for every possible variable simultaneously. But real problems don't need perfect solutions. They need solutions that work within acceptable margins of error." He was in his element now, reading the alien technology like sheet music. Each component had its own rhythm, its own purpose, and when they worked together properly, they created something beautiful. Right now, the Nexus Prime's rhythm was all wrong, too many instruments trying to play different songs at the same time. "This little wire," he said, pointing to the antenna component, "introduces random electrical noise into the calculation stream. Not enough to corrupt the data, but just enough to prevent the system from endlessly refining its own work. It's like giving a perfectionist a deadline." The change was immediate and visible. Energy patterns that had been chaotic and angry began settling into smoother flows. Warning lights that had been flashing for weeks started going dark. The bone-deep humming that had been shaking the station began to quiet. "Temperature readings are stabilizing," Dr. Kelnara announced, her voice filled with wonder. "Quantum fluctuations are returning to normal parameters. Error cascade propagation has stopped," added Veltar, sounding like he was reporting his own death. "This should not be possible with such primitive modifications." Andre laughed, a sound that seemed strange in the high-tech cathedral of the computer core. "Primitive? Maybe. But you know what's not primitive? Recognizing when something's overthinking itself to death and knowing how to snap it out of it." He moved to a central control nexus that had been the epicenter of the cascade failure. This one required a more delicate touch, a combination of his grandfather's radio resistor and some creative rewiring that would have made his high school electronics teacher proud. "The thing is," Andre said as he worked, "intelligence isn't always about being smarter. Sometimes it's about being smart enough to know when to stop being smart and just get the job done." The final connection clicked into place. For a moment, the entire core went silent, not the silence of shutdown, but the silence of a system finally, peacefully thinking clearly. Then the Nexus Prime came alive in a way none of them had ever seen before. The chaotic light patterns resolved into smooth, purposeful flows. The temperature dropped 20 degrees. The air itself seemed to settle as quantum fields stabilized. "Terraforming calculations resuming," Dr. Kelnara announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "Processing efficiency is... this can't be right. It's showing 41% improvement over baseline performance." Andre packed up his tools with the satisfaction of another job well done. Sometimes the best way to make something work better is to let it be imperfect. Your computer just needed permission to make mistakes. In the distance, alarms finally went silent for the first time in 3 weeks. 6 months later, Terrell Jackson found himself standing in the most unlikely classroom in the galaxy. The University of Vega Prime's engineering department had been completely renovated to accommodate what they called human-style problem-solving methodology. Instead of the usual pristine lecture halls with holographic displays, this room looked more like his uncle's garage back in Atlanta, complete with workbenches covered in both alien technology and Earth tools. The key principle, Terrell explained to a class of 30 alien engineering students, is that sometimes the most advanced solution is knowing when not to be advanced. His students were an incredible mix: crystalline Thalans who could process mathematical equations in their sleep, multi-armed Corvins who could manipulate quantum fields with their thoughts, and blue-skinned Vaxi who had been building starships when humans were still figuring out fire. And they were all frantically taking notes as a 24-year-old human from Earth taught them how to fix things with duct tape and common sense. "Professor Jackson," asked one of the Thalan students, its voice coming through the translation system with perfect academic politeness, "how does one quantify the optimal level of imperfection to introduce into a system?" Terrell grinned. After half a year of teaching, he'd learned that aliens love to quantify everything. You don't quantify it, Valkyrie. You feel it. Every system has its own personality, its own rhythm. You listen to what it's telling you, then you give it just enough chaos to break free from whatever's got it stuck. He walked over to a training station where students were working on deliberately broken alien computers. These weren't critical systems, just practice units designed to simulate the kind of recursive loops and cascade failures that had stumped alien engineers for generations. "Kretok, what's your diagnosis on Unit 7? The Corvin student's dozen arms moved in complex patterns over the holographic interface. Quantum processors have entered a competitive calculation state. Each processing node is attempting to optimize the other's work, creating infinite refinement loops. Good. And your solution? According to traditional protocols, I should recalibrate the quantum harmonics and implement synchronized processing governors to prevent internode interference. And how long would that take? Approximately 14 hours of precise calculations and testing. Terrell pulled out a simple wire resistor, the kind of component that cost maybe $3 at any electronics store on Earth. Or you could do this. He plugged the resistor into what looked like the least important connection on the entire system. Immediately, the angry red warning lights shifted to calm blue. The competitive calculation loops broke apart as each processor suddenly had slightly different electrical characteristics to work with. "Repair time, 30 seconds, Terrell announced. "The processors aren't fighting anymore because they're not identical anymore. Sometimes diversity is more important than perfection." The classroom fell into the kind of silence that usually meant either complete understanding or complete confusion. With alien students, it could go either way. "This methodology has been implemented across 47 different star systems," announced Dr. Kelnara, who had become something like Terrell's co-teacher and advocate in the galactic academic community. "The results have been remarkable. Average repair times reduced by 60%. System efficiency improved across all applications." What she didn't mention, what none of the official reports talked about, was how this simple approach had started changing alien culture in ways nobody had expected. Engineers who had spent centuries following precise protocols were learning to trust their instincts. Scientists were discovering that asking, "What if we tried something completely different?" often led to breakthrough discoveries. Terrell's teaching program had expanded far beyond just fixing computers. Human engineers were now working alongside alien teams on everything from terraforming projects to faster-than-light drive improvements. The combination was proving incredibly powerful: alien precision guided by human creativity, alien knowledge enhanced by human intuition. "Next week," Terrell announced as class time ended, "we're going to work on emotional troubleshooting." "Emotional troubleshooting?" asked Zikmar, one of the Vaxi students whose blue skin could change shades based on his mood. "Yeah. Learning to read what a broken system is feeling, not just what it's doing wrong. Every machine has emotions: frustration when it's overworked, loneliness when it's isolated from other systems, anger when it's being pushed beyond its limits. Once you learn to sense those emotions, fixing becomes a lot easier." As the alien students filed out, chattering in a dozen different languages about the day's lessons, Dr. Kelnara approached Terrell's desk. "The Galactic Council has approved funding for 50 more human-alien technical exchange centers," she said, her shimmer brightening with what he'd learned was excitement. "They want to expand the program to every major world in the Alliance." Terrell looked out the classroom window at the sprawling alien city below, then at a picture on his desk showing his old neighborhood back in Atlanta. Kids playing in the streets, his grandmother's house with its peeling paint and crooked front steps, the corner store where he used to buy candy after school. You know what the really cool part is? He said. We're not just teaching them to think like humans. They're teaching us to think like them too. My grandmother always said the best solutions come when different kinds of people work together. Dr. Kelnara's expression was puzzled. Your grandmother was an engineer? Nah, Terrell laughed. She ran a community garden. But turns out the principles are pretty much the same.